August 8th, 1963. A Royal Mail train is screaming through the pitch-black English countryside, hauling a mountain of cash from Glasgow to London. In today's market, we are talking about a staggering $90 million in cold, hard cash. At the controls is 58-year-old Jack Mills, a veteran driver who thought this was just another graveyard shift. He had no idea he was barreling toward a masterpiece of criminal engineering that would change the world of security forever. The job wasn't some random smash and grab. It was a surgical strike planned with military precision. It all started months earlier in the smoky backrooms of London's underworld. Bruce Reynolds, a sophisticated thief with a taste for the finer things, gathered a crew of high-level hustlers to plan the unthinkable. But they had an edge no other gang had: the Ghost Insider. This was a senior security officer deep within the Royal Mail, a man whose identity is still a black hole in the official records 60 years later. This mole provided the golden ticket, the exact schedule of the HVP, or high-value package carriage. On most nights, the HVP was a modest score, but Reynolds knew something the public didn't. Because of a Scottish bank holiday, the banks were overflowing with cash that needed to be moved to London. The train wasn't carrying the usual loot. It was packed with nearly $4 million in 1963 currency, 10 times the normal volume. To make matters worse for the authorities, the state-of-the-art armored carriage that usually handled these hauls was out of service for repairs. In its place, the Royal Mail used a vintage backup carriage, M3024M, which lacked alarms, reinforced bolts, or any modern security. The gang didn't just have a plan, they had an invitation. The crew had the intel, but they were city crooks who didn't know the first thing about heavy machinery. To stop a speeding locomotive, they had to pull off a DIY hack that would fool the most experienced driver in the country. Stick around. At exactly 3 a.m., the gang hit Sears Crossing, a desolate stretch of track far from any prying eyes. They didn't use explosives or roadblocks. They used a low-tech hack that was pure psychological warfare. They knew Jack Mills would follow the signals blindly. So they covered the green signal light with a leather glove and hooked up a standard 6-volt battery to force the red light to glow. When Mills saw the crimson flash in the darkness, he did exactly what he was trained to do. He hauled on the brakes, bringing the massive engine to a hissing halt. His assistant, known in railway terms as the second man, hopped down to the gravel to check the trackside phone. He expected a routine delay. Instead, he found the communication lines cut clean. Dead silence. Before he could even draw a breath to shout, masked figures swarmed from the shadows, gagging and restraining him in seconds. While Hollywood loves to paint these gentlemen heists as victimless crimes, what happened next in the driver's cabin was a cold reality check. When Jack Mills tried to defend his cabin and protect his cargo, one of the robbers lost his cool. He swung a heavy iron bar, cracking Mills over the skull with a sickening thud. It was a vicious, unnecessary blow that would effectively end Mills' career and shadow his health until his final breath. But the gang hit an immediate snag. The specialist driver they'd recruited to move the train to the getaway bridge looked at the modern diesel controls and completely panicked. He was an old-school steam engine guy. This new tech was a foreign language to him. In a desperate, cold-blooded move, they dragged a dazed and badly injured Jack Mills back to the controls. At the end of a metal pipe, they forced a man they'd just assaulted to drive his own hijacked train the final kilometer to the loot drop. They had the train, but moving 2.5 tons of cash in total darkness is a logistical nightmare. Wait until you see how a simple board game became the forensic evidence that ended the greatest run in criminal history. Once the hijacked engine reached Bridgo Bridge, the gang went into a frantic, high-speed overdrive. They knew the clock was ticking. If another train entered the sector, they were finished. They didn't have forklifts or fancy gear. They had a human chain. In just 15 minutes of back-breaking, adrenaline-fueled labor, they moved 120 sacks of cold, hard cash, nearly 2.5 tons of banknotes, into their waiting Austin Lodestar trucks. As the engines roared and the trucks peeled out into the night, one robber shouted a final warning to the tied-up staff. "Don't move for 30 minutes or you're dead." That one sentence was their first fatal error. In the world of forensics, that 30-minute window, told the authorities exactly how far the getaway vehicles could have traveled. It allowed Scotland Yard to draw a perfect 30-mile circle on the map. The crew holed up at Leatherslade Farm, a remote, dilapidated property they'd rented as their war room. They felt like they had won the lottery. They were so cocky, so convinced of their own genius, that they spent the next few days celebrating inside the farm. They even famously played a game of Monopoly, not with play money, but with the actual stolen high-value banknotes they had just looted. When the radio announced that the police were closing in on the sector, the crew panicked. They split the cash and cleared out, heading for the city. They had paid an associate a massive stack of cash to clean the farm, which meant torching the building to the ground to erase every DNA trace. But the cleaner got cold feet. He took the money and bolted, leaving the hideout perfectly intact. When the feds and Scotland Yard rolled in, they didn't just find a hideout, they found a gold mine. The Monopoly board was sitting right there, a graveyard of high-quality fingerprints on the dice, the tokens, and the cards. The authorities had their names within hours, but the story was far from over. One man was about to pull off a prison break so daring, it would make him a global icon for the next 3 decades. Stay tuned for the escape. The Monopoly board was the ultimate smoking gun. Since the crew were mostly career criminals with existing records, their prints were already in the system. Within weeks, the feds had rounded up 14 out of the 16 men involved. They were handed 30-year sentences, the harshest ever given for a non-capital crime in the UK at the time. But the story took a legendary viral turn with a small-time thief named Ronnie Biggs. Biggs wasn't about to rot in a cold cell. Just 15 months into his stretch at Wandsworth Prison, he scaled a 30-foot wall with a rope ladder and dropped into a waiting furniture van. He went completely underground, fleeing to Paris for plastic surgery to change his identity, before jumping to Australia and finally landing on the sunny beaches of Rio de Janeiro, Brazil. But the man caught in the crossfire, Jack Mills, never got his justice. He passed away just 7 years after the heist, never having recovered from the physical and mental trauma of that night at Sears Crossing. The money is gone, the crew is gone, but the shadows of the Great Train Robbery are forever. Part of the origin untold. The inside man who gave them the secret tip was never identified. He walked away with his cut and disappeared into history. Who was the ghost in the Royal Mail? Sound off in the comments and hit that sub button for more of history's most guarded secrets.